Okay, that's the first day of work for the Two-Spot. That's when it landed in the Alberni Valley. They took it out, and this is on the south end of town near the road that goes to China Creek and Bamfield. And there they are, they're loading logs onto the cars behind the Two-Spot. And they got a big sign on there that says first logs, and first logging in the Alberni Valley with steam. So that's the beginning of the Two-Spot. That's a train wreck near the Quality Foods. It was used and it was worked hard at different logging camps around the Alberni Valley. By the 1940s, it was getting quite old and it was well worn and it was small. And everything are all on this side, so the weight is on this side. My name is David Hooper, and I was for several years a conductor on the steam train from Port Alberni out to the McLean Mill. It was Expo 86 in Vancouver. It was a Transportation World's Fair. There's the firebox right here. They had a steam week or something like that. And so they were invited to send the Two-Spot over. And the Two-Spot went over along with a restored logging truck from the McLean Mill and a steam donkey. That's when they took it over to Vancouver to the Expo 86. Now, that's smoke coming out of there is not a good sign. Photographers like it, and that's a bad sign. That means you got your fire wrong. So Port Alberni actually was the center of the action there during Steam Week, because not only was their steam train working, it actually was working. They were loading logs and unloading logs, lifting them up, taking them off, running the steam donkey. It was a real high point. And then Two-Spot came home and did more summer runs until the early 1990s when the old boiler finally failed. That was the last time that the Two-Spot was operating on the tracks, because that was when the McLean Mill project was coming up with a steam tourist train as part of the package. And there was one pot of money, and there was quite a lot of discussing back and forth of whether the money should go to the restoration of the Two-Spot or to the number 7. Because the number 7 was a newer locomotive, a bit heavier, more powerful, and it was designed for longer hauls. The Two-Spot was designed for pulling out 1 and 2 log cars at a time and bringing them to the main line to be hauled down to a log dump. And so the decision was made to put the money into the number 7. Put some heavy grease in here. That's why you see the typical engineer shot in between runs, and he's sitting here with his oil can going squirt, 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 right? There's all these moving parts here. They volunteered and they retubed the whole thing. They basically rebuilt it for us, the boiler, which is the guts of a steam locomotive. And they did it for the city for free, basically. Because those guys did probably $250,000 worth of work free. You know, the 1 year shut down, couldn't run anyways, and then the COVID, so we fired it up because the boiler inspector came and said, hey, show me it works. Test it out, and so it's been run, but it hasn't been taken out on the road. Again, you have to remember the Two-Spot is perhaps the original artifact in the industrial collection that the city owns. And so how do you look after it? How do you present it? As I've already said, The locomotive is presentable right now, thanks to those young fellows that did the work on it 8 years ago. There's also going to be a cost involved. If you put a roof over it, the city has expertise in doing shelters like that if you go down to Canal Beach. There are half a dozen towns on Vancouver Island that have locomotives on display. And I think we can learn and get ideas from seeing what has Comox done.
There's the handbrake, your parking brake, you see? Stay seated until a crummy stops. This is called a crummy, because guys used to eat in here and it was full of crumbs.
You have Lake Cowichan and you have Chemainus. Their old locomotives are parked out in the open, where you can actually try clambering all over them. Okay, in Chemainus the cab is secured. They don't want people going inside and stuff like that, but otherwise it's totally accessible. In Lake Cowichan, the kids jump up and down and climb on the roof and all that, but it's a small town and a bit more loose. But this wall was all rotted out, the windows were all rotted out on there underneath. That's the kind of stuff where the city will be involved. After all, they're the owner. And so they'll be having some serious decisions to make about security and safety. I am convinced that we can find funding for it, and I'm convinced that we can get people to support this project.